You're not born a natural salesperson, everybody, but if you want to get better, you can. Edith, I think you've actually gotten worse. But I think what I see a lot of people do is get paralyzed and afraid to try. You have to keep trying stuff until you figure out what works.
Hi, I'm Yaron Sadka, sales engineer at Iron.io. You're listening to Road to Growth, a podcast about startup sales organizations brought to you by HeavyBit, a 9-month program for developer-facing startups. Road to Growth is a bi-weekly series that breaks down SaaS sales organizations one piece at a time, from the first person to kick off sales at a company, all the way down to the partnership and cohesion with the marketing and product teams. We'll take you through what it takes to build a powerful, fine-tuned sales organization. If you're interested in being a guest, have a topic for us to discuss, or a role you'd like us to dive into, send an email to roadtogrowth@heavybit.com. In this episode, I'm joined by Edith Harbaugh, co-founder and CEO of LaunchDarkly. Edith and I discuss the underlying sales parallels between fundraising, recruiting, and product. Well, we have Edith Harbaugh with us today of LaunchDarkly. Welcome, Edith.
Thanks, Yaron.
Great to have you here. Last time we had Chad Aramura, had a great conversation with him about kind of what's been going on at Iron.io for him and his team. I'm really excited to have you with us here today. So before we get into that, all that good stuff, if you don't mind kind of taking us back to who you are, right? We know you're the co-founder, CEO of LaunchDarkly, but how did you get there and what kind of brought you to this point?
Great. So I'm Edith Harbaugh. I'm CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly. We're a developer tool that helps power better continuous delivery. And my background is actually as an engineer. I got a bachelor's in engineering and graduated at the height of the dot-com boom and worked at both as a dot-com consultant and then as an enterprise software company called Epicenter, which is now long gone. But I was an engineer in there, and I actually have several patents in deploying components between different developer environments. After that, I decided that the waterfall model was broken, and the issue was that product wasn't right. So I became a product manager. You know, an engineer always thinks that they could fix the world if they're just in the right place.
Right.
And so I became a product manager, and then I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know.
Okay.
Like when you're in engineering, you think it's incredibly obvious what you should be building. Once you're in product, you're like, oh, When you're an engineer, you think you could fix the world if you're in the right place. Once you're in that other place, you realize that you didn't really see the whole world. Mm-hmm. So I was in product at Epicenter. We were acquired by Vignette. And then I started going on customer calls and really saw how enterprise sales worked. After that, I decided consumers had more fun, and I was a product director at TripIt, where I started their TripIt for Business unit from the ground up and grew it to $1 million. The common thing was that I always wanted to make software a little bit better, and I realized that with a tool like LaunchDarkly, everybody could make better releases faster. And so I started the company with my good friend from college, John Kodemal, who'd been an architect at Coverity and a software manager at Atlassian.
So you're a relatively young company, and so you're young, you're setting a foundation, you're kind of learning a lot as you go. Before you have all this money now that you've raised with the seed round, right? So congratulations on that. Take us back to when you're first starting, you're building this company, it's the two of you. You want to raise capital so you can actually build this thing, right? What's that process like? How was it for you and John kind of navigating the waters, doing this for the first time? Yeah,
so we actually did really well. We raised $2.6 million. The biggest realization for me was that at the beginning, I did not want to raise money. It was really hard. I wasn't very good at it. And the realization I came to was that if I was the CEO, a big part of my job was going to be fundraising. There would be a seed round, an A round, a B round, all the way to hopefully an IPO. And this was part of my job now. And the other realization I had was that it's okay to be terrible if you put the effort in to get better. Mm-hmm. So I said I had been an enterprise product manager and I'd gone on sales calls. One of my favorite salespeople was a guy named Rich Gascoigne. And he covered the New York territory, which was the most lucrative. He had Martha Stewart as a client. He had Kaplan as a client. He made a ton of money.
He had the whales for you guys.
Yeah, he had the whales. He had all the big New York accounts. And the reason why he had all the whales is because he really needed the money.
Okay.
So this is a dot-com story. He'd been part of Vignette. And at one time, Vignette stock was over $300. And he'd started to build, his dream house. He bought a really nice car. And he'd done this thing where he hadn't actually sold his options. His shares basically borrowed against them. because he's trying to get better tax treatment. Long story short, dot-com bust happened. Shares that were worth $300 were now worth around 75 cents. He lost the house to the bank, had to move back in with his parents, and on top of that, he owed the government around in the high six figures because he had tried to get a favorable tax treatment on stock that was now pretty much a fraction of the cost. Mm-hmm. A lesser person would have said, I'm going to declare bankruptcy and give up. Rich said, okay, the only way I could make the money back is not by being a product manager, but by becoming a salesperson making a lot of money. So he worked so hard, and I learned so much from him. And that was really an inspiration when I started trying to raise money, was that, you're not born a natural salesperson, everybody, but if you want to get better, you can.
So you learned a lot from Rich and a lot of time out in the field doing your enterprise sales. Are there any tidbits that really stuck with you? So, you're raising funds, you're talking to all these investors. What kind of pieces were at the top of your mind when you were kind of going through that?
I think that I treat it like a sales process. I had my pipeline of different people I talked to. I talked to a lot of different VCs, and it was also a mutual thing. Not every investor is the right investor for a company, or vice versa. It really is like a sales process. You have your big pipeline, and then you're qualifying your leads. Like, is this the right person for my product, or the product is your company? Mm-hmm.
So when you're in the room with investors, then, right? Everybody knows you have a deck. You kind of talk and go back and forth. But what's that really like? What's that process like for you since you are selling?
That's a great question, because I'd say the pitch with the investor is just the beginning. And this is something that I hadn't realized. The movies glamorize it by you drive down to Sand Hill Road and you pitch in this big room full of investors. That's actually like the really end when you have a partner meeting.
Okay.
Like, the beginning is you meet with an investor for a half-hour coffee, or an hour coffee, and you chat. You might have a deck, you might not. If they like you, then they'll go into due diligence. And this is, again, like a sales process, because everybody's due diligence is different. And due diligence basically means they're trying to vet you in the company and see if there's something there. So some investors will have you talk to their current portfolio companies. Others will want to talk to your current customers.
Okay.
Others will want you to talk to technical experts in your field. It's basically because, so Tom Drummond put it really well. He's like, the investors have money, but they don't always know enough to thoroughly understand what you're doing.
Correct. There's still a learning process there for them. They have their little market segments, right, that they at least understand the general market, but they don't know individual products, right? And so now you need to educate them on what it is that you're filling and the kind of need in the market that you're going to be hopefully capturing and succeeding at, right?
So it's very much like a sales process.
Yeah, exactly.
Like where the initial partner that you pitch is then your champion.
Exactly. And you're starting to use the terminology, right? Just like the way we do in the sales world is you need the champion to kind of like take you home and bring you through the whole process.
Yeah.
So, just like you guys in fundraising, hey, you're our champion. You believe in us. You know what we're trying to sell and kind of taking that all the way to the end until you actually raise that money, which is great. And it there's a lot of parallels there between the two. So what kind of pieces, when you're pitching investors, do you kind of translate now into the sales world? Well,
they're hand in hand. You have your champion. Every product has to have somebody that says, this will make me look better. This will make me look better. This will save my company money. This will save me time, or this will just improve our life. Mm-hmm. And so that's the same when you actually have selling the product. So the first thing is the product of your company, and then the product is your product.
Right. So you're now going through with talking to all these investors. You have your pipeline down. You have your initial meeting with them, right? What happens then? They kind of take you through. How do they, is it your responsibility to talk to them after that? Is it their responsibility to then be like, hey, is this like an interview, right? Or is this more of you driving the process?
So I got really good advice from Tom Drummond, who's the managing director here at HeavyBit, which was, I had this notion that, if an investor wanted to invest, you just kind of waited them. And he's like, no, investors are really busy. They're probably hearing 50 or 60 pitches a week. And that's not even counting the random ones with, like, if they accidentally wear a hoodie outside, people just pitch them at the store.
Right.
So he's like, you got to, he's like, drive it like a sales process. And I'm like, okay, I could do that.
So did you have like a whole Excel like built out with, with who you were talking to, what VC they were with?
Oh yeah. Like I treat it like a pipeline.
Right. So it's bringing back like all these flashbacks of just like, oh man, late nights and, constantly refining the pitch that you guys are giving.
Oh, the pitch. Oh, the pitch changed so many times. I treated it like, so I'm really into lean startup stuff.
Okay.
And again, I think what helped me the most was I'm just like, okay, I'm going to be terrible. That's fine. I will keep being terrible until I get better. Because I think people have this misguided notion that you're like born with this perfect pitch.
Right. Yeah.
Just
if only.
And I was perfectly willing to admit, I'm like, okay, I'm not very good at this right now. I'm going to keep pitching until I get better.
So you essentially employed continuous delivery on your pitches and just kind of kept refining them.
Yeah. And it wasn't a linear path either. Like there was a point where my co-founder, John, is like, Edith, I think you've actually gotten worse.
Wow.
And he's like, I think you've tried it. He's like, you've degraded. I'm like,
and what was that like? I mean, he's telling you that you're now putting a pitch out there that he thinks is not as good as it was before. How did that kind of like?
Oh, it hurt.
Yeah.
But again, I draw parallels back to lean startup, and as well, I'm a big runner. I do 100-mile races, and you have to keep trying stuff until you figure out what works.
And so, you're constantly iterating and going through all this stuff. Did you finally figure out like, oh, there's this one that's just stuck, or is it still like living and breathing, but you have your basic foundations kind of underneath that?
I have the basic foundations, but it is just like sales. You will find the right customer for your product and vice versa.
So you tailored your pitches and your discussions based on the VCs that you were talking to and their knowledge of what was going on.
And then I found the people that really got it. I mean, it's just like, when you're selling, you're a salesperson. like when you go try to sell your product to, just a random person writing the Muni.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's software, right? The first question is you kind of have to figure out who they are and where they're coming from. And once you have that knowledge, then you can tailor it, right? So at least for myself, I have 3 or 5 different pitches that I can discuss with somebody depending on their knowledge of the industry, their knowledge of technology at its current state. And depending on all that information, I either go with something very layman and very basic, or something that's very drawn out and very specific, because that's the kind of person they are, right? So there's always the core pieces to every pitch, but there's the nuances that go above that, kind of one level a little higher, that you can kind of segment out depending on who you're talking to. So you're fundraising, you learn this kind of like sales technique for it. And now looking back at that, right, as you kind of like, it's over, it's done with, what are kind of like 2 or 3 pieces you can pick from there and say like, I did that really well, I'm going to continue to do that with clients. I did that really well, I'm going to continue to do that with clients here. Are there 2 or 3 different things you can pick out from there?
I think the biggest is, again, not deliberately being not good, but I think what I see a lot of people do is get paralyzed and afraid to try. Mm-hmm. Because they're like, oh, my pitch isn't going to be very good, therefore I'm not going to pitch.
So then are you constantly picking up the phone and talking to clients and trying it out?
Yeah.
Taking this back to investors and all that, right? Now you're building a company, right? You're starting to now hire employees, grow things out. So you're essentially recruiting, right? Which is also now in a sale, if you think about it. So, kind of take us down that path now. And instead of selling investors, you now need to sell your hires on the company and why they should join you. So
they're both sales, but they're very different kind of sales. What you're pitching when you're pitching investors, you're pitching a vision. Okay. So an investor is not buying, an investor is not investing based on what you are today. They're investing based on the fact that you'll be a 10x, 100x success. So if I put, $1 million in now, it'll be worth 10 million, 50 million. So you're pitching this huge vision of how you're going to change the world of software. When you're trying to recruit an employee, that's a necessary thing. But what an employee really cares about is this the right place for me? Mm-hmm. Is this going to be the place where I'm happy, where my career goes forward, where I have the, and everybody has a little different thing that makes them happy. Right. So I'd say the vision is important because there's so many, everybody's recruiting, but it's not really about the vision and the money because, everybody in San Francisco right now seems to have raised more, millions of dollars and is bidding. But I think the most important thing for recruiting is really listening to recruits and what's important to them.
So what, when you're talking to recruits and you're kind of doing the active listening part, are there any things that come up more often than others that they, usually want to hear, right? Everybody wants to grow in their career. Are there any that you've heard that you've kind of been like, this is a great place for you because of that?
I think the most important thing is every one of the people that works with us, I know they had a lot more money on the table from somewhere else.
Okay. So how'd you guys overcome that, right? Like Google's like, hey, I'll give you $250,000.
Or more.
Or more. I mean, especially if you're hiring seniors that are great employees.
So every person was different. So what I did is I would sit and I would ask them, what's important to you?
Oh, so you flat out just said, what are you looking for?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this before, Yeah. You don't know until you ask.
No, that's a totally a valid point, right? A lot of people are scared to ask questions, right? Or, I don't want to make this uncomfortable or something like that, right? And at least me personally, I got into the room and I had the same mind frame when I first started, and then it kind of became a thing like, just ask the question.
Yeah.
Right? They can always give you a terrible answer or like kind of sidestep it, but usually people are willing to offer that information right away with no qualms about it. So it's this mentality you kind of have to get used to of just asking the question and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
So
and I think there's this mythology that the best salespeople are like in Glengarry, Glen Ross, these fast talkers, these slick people who talk you into something.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you've seen the movie, like they didn't sell any land. Everybody wanted their money back.
I haven't seen it, but I know the story.
Wait.
Yeah.
How can you be a sales? No, all right. There are so many good lessons from Glengarry, Glen Ross.
I haven't seen it in its entirety. I've seen like little portions, and I know all the little like sales clips, right? Like coffees for closers is a big one that everybody always talks about in sales, and there's all these other ones, but I have never actually sat down and seen the movie in its entirety.
Well,
and
the best line that really helped me when I was fundraising was there's this line where Alex Baldwin is giving this lecture, and he says, "They don't walk on the lot unless they want to buy."
Yeah, that's true.
And that really helped me when I was fundraising because, I had this idea that, I would just sit back and people would throw money at me, and that wasn't happening.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And then Tom Drummond is like, no, you have to follow up. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. Like,
sure. Why not?
Yeah. But so there's this perception that you have to be this slick talker like that movie. Mm-hmm. And really when you're trying to get people to join your company, to be part of a team, what you really need to do is listen.
Yeah, definitely. It's very important to listen, and I know, at least for me, I try to let the client talk as much as they want, and just sit there and wait until they're done to ask either the next question or continue the conversation, because a lot of times it's more about what they are trying to communicate and nobody's listening to them. And this way, all I have to do is sit there until they're done, and whether I actually listen or not, it doesn't matter. They feel heard. And then we can continue the conversation. So it's definitely, drawing that back to recruiting and listening to your employees or hopefully potential employees and what they want is great advice or great kind of like pick from that information, right? So sales and recruiting, they might be different, but you're still selling.
Yeah.
There's still parallels to be drawn from that. So.
Yeah, and it goes back to selling, because you could be, rambling on and on about how you have like 24/7 uptime, but what a customer really cares about is like, what does your dashboard look like, or
right.
Something completely different.
Like, is your billing all integrated? Am I going to be overbilled and have to call you every month in order to get a credit on my credit card statement? Which is the most aggravating thing you could possibly do to a client.
Yeah, so I think a lot of good selling is listing. And that's actually a little bit of the reverse from fundraising and pitching, which I had to learn. I learned I was actually very good at selling in a listing mode, but what I really had to work on was pitching a vision. Because I had to fallen back on what I was very good at, is the listing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, if I need to fundraise, I actually have to talk about a vision, not just listen to the VC ramble about what's going on in their life.
Which would be nice, but unfortunately now it's the spotlight's on you, as they say, right? And you kind of have to do the sell. So, are there any positions that you found are harder to recruit for or anything like that? Are there, the more senior engineers, do they require more time and like energy from you?
The biggest one is mobile, and I think that's just because mobile is so hot. And we have a very specialized need. We want somebody that's going to build mobile continuous delivery, which is groundbreaking and revolutionary.
Awesome. No, that sounds exciting. So, like what's that process been like? Are you talking to people? Is it hard to find people for that kind of position?
It's a role where I think there's not many people who could do it. So that's the issue.
So not a lot of people, you're competing. Are there pieces that you feel LaunchDarkly can compete at, right? So taking money off the table, what's kind of the benefit of working at LaunchDarkly over some large Fortune 100 company?
Well, the benefit for everybody is different.
I mean, if you had a senior person in front of you that you're like, man, if I could only get them to work here, right? There's usually kind of like different.
Well, I would start by saying, hey, well, first I would say, okay, why are they even in front of me? And that goes back to they don't come on the lot unless they want to buy.
Right.
So the fact that they're meeting with me means they're somewhat interested.
Okay.
If they're not interested, people are busy.
Right.
Like it's the same when we were talking about prospecting earlier. It's like if people don't pick up the phone and answer unless they're somewhat willing.
Yeah. No, that means that there's definitely some sort of connection that they feel. So
if I had this person in front of me, I would say, hey, I'm interested to know why you're interested in a new thing.
Right. So why are you looking? What's the draw essentially of coming to work for us? You have all these great opportunities. What are you doing here?
Well, right, I would have been like, what are you doing here?
Not in those words, but it's that the dreaded question every employee hates to answer is like, why are you interested in us? Right?
Yeah, and that's why you don't put it like that.
So you have a better way of navigating the waters, I take it.
Yeah, you say, you say you're very skilled. You seem like a really talented person. I'm interested in knowing more about what you're interested in.
Okay, good.
like you don't want to sound like, please.
Yeah, we love you. Can we just give you an offer and call it a day?
Well, it's the same when you're selling software.
Yeah.
You don't really, please use our software. I need to make my quota.
You know what's funny is it's never, at least for now, it's never come down to quota for me. And I think that might be because I'm a sales engineer and not a full salesperson, but I rarely hate using the quota as a reason to sell somebody something. And I don't know if you've experienced that on your own, but using the quota to kind of sell is the worst way to get a customer.
Well, that's what I mean.
I'm like, okay, so now I sold you software and it's not going to work for you, which means you're going to be mad. And now my guys are going to have to deal with it and they're going to be mad and nobody wins, but the company gets like a couple $100 and we call it a day.
That's why the whole selling process is they're finding out, is there a mutual fit? Mm-hmm. Like to go back to the fundraising and to the hires, like if they say what's really important to me is, something I'm like, oh, we can't meet that need.
Yeah. Okay. So taking that now, so you have fundraising down, we have hires down. As you grow, right? This company's growing, it's going to be doing great things. How do you find a way to stay tied to the product and your vision along with John's versus letting it kind of consume you and like you're so focused on your CEO role, right, that you've kind of left it in other people's hands?
I think that's a great question. And I read a really good blog post by Paul Graham pretty recently. And he said startup people aren't motivated by money. Mm-hmm. This is a long way to get to your answer.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
If you want to make a lot of money, there's a lot easier way to do it than a startup.
Definitely, yeah. I think we both know that.
And he said great startup people are usually motivated because this is their project. And right. and that's the way I feel is, I've had a lot of success in my life. I took two products from literally zero to over $1 million in sales. I bicycled cross country. I ran 100 miles. Separate things. Didn't bicycle and then run. That would be
that would be pretty impressive.
But now I want to change the way people build software. So it's not really. I didn't say I want to be a CEO. I said I want to change the way people build software.
I think that's a big reason why a lot of us are doing what we do. We see the world as it is today, and we know the capabilities of what can be done. And it's not aggravating, but it's almost a little frustrating to us at how things are done. And we want to go out there and change it. And sure, we could go, make all this money and live nice and comfortably, but there's more to it than that. And I think you touched on that, which is like building great software and helping the people around us do the same. And the final endpoint, right, wherever it reaches, is the best it can be for what it is today. So with that, thank you very much, Edith, for joining us. We appreciate the time. A lot of great information from Edith over her time so far running LaunchDarkly, and from fundraising to hiring, and kind of what she's gone through. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, Yaron.
That's all we have time for today. Questions? Feedback? Contact me at roadtogrowth@heavybit.com. Thanks again to Heavybit for sponsoring our program. To learn more about Heavybit's 9-month program for developer-facing startups, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, make sure to check out their library. It's packed with great educational talks from developer company founders and industry leaders. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great week.